There's a question, and the question I have, but you know how like ALEC, like the American Legislative Exchange Committee, they're like behind all these like awful stand ground laws and, you know, the cookie cutter bills, and the way we're seeing that these anti-abortion laws sort of replicate one another and spawn and just copycat.
Right.
What's the dark force? Is it like who's the dark money group?
There's a couple.
Or is it a
there's
like an awful amalgamation?
Yeah.
There's a couple. There is Americans United for Life, which I often call the ALEC of the anti-abortion movement.
Yeah.
Who create model legislation and drop the model legislation. And just like all this other stupid ass legislation, sometimes they don't even change the name of the state. The other state they dropped in. Whoops, we forgot to cross off Indiana when we're in North Carolina. So there's Americans United for Life. And then the lawyers, the Thomas More Society and the Federalist Society are just like have so much money. There's something called the Blackstone Group that is barfing out 150 anti-abortion lawyers every 6 months. So their movement is just like loaded and funded to have lawyers for anybody to take these cases on.
It's like BlackRock, Black Cube, like every time,
know, right? Every time.
It's like I'm creating an evil company that's going to destroy the world. What should I call it?
Black something.
Black trapezoid.
Yep, for sure.
So weird.
Yeah, it is so weird. And then they have the Susan B. Anthony list, which is a political action committee that supports anybody who prioritizes abortion on their platform. So they're like Emily's List, but for the anti-abortion movement. And there's just like so many, the intersections are just so, and then you have the intersections with white nationalist groups. And I wrote an op-ed for NBC.com about 2 months ago. We have been tracked. One of the things that we do at Abortion Access Front is that we track the anti-abortion movement. And we have the largest database of anti-abortion extremists that exists. And when January 6th happened, we identified 30 anti-abortion leaders at the insurrection and turned them over, and then directly linked the movement to, you know, the Oath Keepers and the 3%ers and Ali Alexander and the whole gang. So
a little hypocritical that the anti-abortion people were trying to abort the election, you know?
I mean, I think
well, I mean, you have Steve Bannon who's like, we have to kill the Biden administration in the cradle. Remember that?
Oh yeah.
That's like,
well, that's consistent. They're happy to kill born babies.
Oh, exactly.
Oh, all the time. I mean, I just don't trust anybody who's arrested by the postal police.
But this is this is the thing for me. Like, I forgot he was arrested with
on a boat.
This is the thing for me about like reproductive rights and freedom and like women's issues, especially, or things that are seen as strictly women's issues. Like the first, you know, Anita Sarkeesian's been on this show, and like she was in the crosshairs of the Gamergate bullshit, and you know she and others were, you know, sounding the alarms about white nationalists online, and everyone's like, it's not real, and then it creates Trump, essentially. And like the same thing with, you know, reproductive rights groups and you guys and the ways that you're like, we see how nuts these antis are outside of these clinics, and they're not just up to this stuff, they're up to a lot of other stuff. And it's like, what's that issue?
But we monitor so we go so far as we have a whole consortium of people who have had dummy accounts on social media for years, active dummy accounts. And it takes about 3 months to 100% radicalize an account, which is really scary.
Wow.
To go from, to just like what you're suggested, the things you suggested by the couple of things that you happen to say online. But we have these accounts and we join these churches. And so we attend these church services. And when you hear over and over and over again, these pastors who have set up militia camps for kids, who are saying we have to arm ourselves to protect our Christian nation. And that, you know, there's a whole thing called the doctrine of the lesser magistrate, which is basically, that's a fancy phrase for saying we can fudge biblical interpretation to justify any of our actions.
Of course.
Yeah.
And so, justify, they were raising money for Kyle Rittenhouse. They were part of the people who took to the streets in Kenosha. They're two-way psychos. It's really astounding.
What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/Bitchuation Room. Do it.